does religious devotion make somebody inclined toward violent radicalization? Absolutely not. And the proof is that the people who are most learned in Islamic jurisprudence are almost never found involved in violent radicalization. It is these folks who have sort of an amateur's level of proficiency, who have memorized a few verses, taken them out of context, that you find mixed up in these things. None of the 19 were known as Islamic scholars. Alaki is not an Islamic scholar, and so the answer is clearly no.
There's one thing I think we know for certain, and that is that there are many different paths to radicalization. And I think we should be very skeptical of anybody who comes up and says, well, I have the answer and here's the story. The second thing is that the people who radicalize, there is no profile either in terms of their history, their background, ethnicity. Some radicalize alone, some radicalize with peer groups, some are connected with foreign terrorist organizations, some are not. If you look at ethnicity, the study that we did showed that of the Muslim American community, we had virtually equal numbers of, since 9/11, of people with South Asian, Middle Eastern, African American, white backgrounds. The thing I think that this theme of alienation, though, I think is very important. There's some dissatisfaction in people's lives that drives them to this ideology, that makes them vulnerable to it, and then they are attracted to it. But we've been doing criminology for 20, 30 years since the real boom in crime, and we don't really know why two kids in an urban setting who grow up in the same family, one of them goes off and joins a gang and ends up in jail, and the other makes it through high school and gets a good job. So we haven't answered that question, and we don't really know enough about this process, which radicalization and this kind of radicalization we're talking about, we've been studying for much shorter amounts of time. So there's still a lot of very open questions.
I think there's some interesting conversations that are happening within the community, and then between the community, and then those working on the issue outside the community. Within the community, I think for a long time it's been a question of this isn't representative of the community. It's such a small, marginal, isolated incidents that aren't connected to what the community believes or how the community acts. But I think what's beginning to happen is there's a need to engage on the issue, because these are dwarfing any other work, positive work that is happening in the community. There's the way in which the society is framing the Muslim community is exclusively through this lens, and so it's becoming an issue, the need to respond. But what's interesting, and I think it goes to the question you asked Rashad about, to what extent is the community aware or even involved, and I think it's I've been kind of slowly entering into this conversation after really working within the community for a while, and I'm realizing that these are really isolated and siloed conversations. Where if you go into the counterterrorism groups, and they can rattle off every single attempted act and who's tried it and where they've tried it, and they've had the list of who's on the the watch list or whatever. But when you go into the Muslim community, there's really not as much information about this, because it hasn't been an open discussion within the community. And even if you were to say, has the community even watched, if you ask an average community member, have they watched the Al-Aluki's videos, they'll say, we don't even want to click on them because we don't want to watch them on our computers, so that if our computer's overtaken, it's not on. I mean, it's really this question about where is the conversation and what are the issues that are being discussed. And so there's this, and a lot of the conversations between government and between community has been one-way information gathering and not necessarily information sharing. And so there's a need to have a conversation internally about that. And then taking it one step further, it's also how we're framing the conversation. Because I think a lot of times the way it's being framed is as the community needs to be monitored. And if you're monitoring the community, that's assuming that every Muslim is a potential terrorist, and that's not really how the community views itself.